Dear children, let us not love with only words, but let's love with actions and in truth. Let's put the spirit of the word compassion into our doing, because compassion isn't concerned with our material well-being and material things. It's concerned with our spirit and alleviating the suffering of others. So let's be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ, God, forgave us. The icon makers believed that we can synchronize with the cosmic Christ through the image, because emanating from his heart and transmitted through his eyes is an ambient magnetic field of love, a field of compassion. Through the image, the Christ energy can bypass our conscious mind and literally influence us at the quantum level in a non-local way. In the unified field, the Christ field, the field of energy and information which connects all things physical and governs all the laws of the universe, the field where there is no separation between me, you, and Christ, you are connected to everything and everyone. We're quantumly entangled with the cosmic Christ. Thus, the more connected you are to the field through the image, which acts like a laser to focus the power of your soul and your actions, then we can experience the more non-local effects through the cosmic Christ. This is our quest. This is our goal. And this is what we are doing at this moment by connecting through Christ through these images. Compassion wires the brain. Compassion, according to medical science, causes the left side of the brain's prefrontal cortex region just above the eyes. Compassion is good for the heart. Compassion is about warm emotional contact. When we connect with others in a deep emotional way, we produce the hormone oxytocin. One of the key roles of this hormone is in the maintenance of the cardiovascular health. It dilates the arteries and reduces blood pressure and also helps clear out potentially disease-causing agents. Compassion slows aging. Research shows a strong connection between compassion and the vagal tone, which is the term that describes the health and fitness of the vagus nerve, much as the muscle tone describes the muscles. The vagus nerve controls the body's inflammatory response, known as the inflammatory reflex. And as we increase vagal tone through compassion, we improve the body's ability to reduce inflammation. Compassion improves relationships. Research shows that compassion fosters emotional connections between two people. A structured practice of compassion meditation improves the quality of personal and professional relationships. It motivates kindness. Compassion quickly evolves into kindness, where we are moved to do something to ease another person's suffering. We not only share the pain, but we want the other person's suffering eased and erased. And ultimately, compassion fuels our Hot Wheels. In the image of the cosmic Christ, he has the activated crown, the activated healing hands, the activated light body, and the activated wheels of the cosmic Christ called the Ophanim of the Merkaba throne. I want to turn now to the the resurrection morning on Easter morning. We're going to do that by turning to this incredible painting, The Morning of the Resurrection by Edward Burns Jones. The scene depicted is Mary Magdalene's visit to the empty tomb, where she encounters the resurrected Christ accompanied by angels. She beholdeth two angels, says the book of John, two angels in white, sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. As Matthew describes it, it was laid on the Sabbath day, and behold, there was a great earthquake. And Mary Magdalene had come to the tomb, and an angel of the Lord, one of the risen ones, descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat upon it. His appearance was as lightning, and his raiment was white as snow. And for fear of him, the watchers did quake and became as dead men. These are the Roman soldiers. And the angel answered and said unto the woman, Mary Magdalene, fear not ye, for I know ye seek Jesus, who hath been crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, even as he said, come see the place where the Lord lay. This moment is the fulfillment of the Essene plan involving the watcher angels and the risen and the Essenes to infuse humanity with a cosmic impulse of energy that reverberates to this day. In fact, we are on the receiving edge of that infusion at this very moment. As Matthew describes, his appearance was as lightning and his raiment white as snow. That's describing both the angel who rolled away the stone and the resurrected Jesus, who now has transfigured into his light body or his resurrection body. And this is the key teaching of all the Ascension Masters, is that Christ came to demonstrate how we can rise into the ascended realms. In these images, especially here in Fra Angelico's resurrection from the tomb, we see the resurrected Christ rising from the tomb and also rising upon the Shroud of Turin. And I want to talk about the shroud as we continue here. Here's another example from Fra Angelico, where we see a collection of tools in front of Jesus. We see Mary Magdalene and the Mother Mary, Joseph, Nicodemus, and others are carrying Christ upon this linen shroud that we now call the Shroud of Turin. In this image, we see that Christ is already illuminated. He's golden. He's radiating light. He's a luminous being. But in between his resurrection, in between being laid in the tomb and his resurrection, Jesus spent time in limbo, in the other world, in the realm where the righteous of all the Old Testament times and the pre-flood times were waiting for his arrival. And in Christian art, we see him descending into the underworld as this illuminated being, carrying his rod of resurrection, preparing to free all of those who were waiting for his arrival. In these scenes, we see that he has got demons that are all around, that he will duke it out with, that he's overcome. These are the beasts of the ancient world. In this example here from the Kora Church in Istanbul, we see Jesus descending into limbo through a radiant portal or gateway. He wears his garment of luminous light, indicating he's already a light being, and he's gone into this otherworldly realm in order to retrieve the righteous from the pre-flood times. And then he rises on Easter morning. He appears to Mary Magdalene in the garden, wearing his luminous garment of light. And he tells her, "Do not touch me. Do not touch me," indicating that he's no longer in his physical flesh and blood body. He is now in his risen body. He is now in his light body. He's now in his glory body, a holographic type of body that is luminous, radiant, but still humanoid. It's a manifestation of his flesh and blood body. It's a return to his original form. And this is why in Christian art, in these Nolo me tangere scenes, or do not touch me scenes, where Magdalene is seeing the risen Christ for the first time, we see that his cloak or his garment is covered with stars. It's because he is now in his ascended form. He's in his star body, his radiant body, his glory body, his light body. He has completed his earthly transformation. And he always in these scenes carries his resurrection stick. Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live." Both medieval and Renaissance art began to depict the resurrected Christ by using the flag of St. George, which is therefore his symbol of resurrection. In the 15th and 16th century in Florence, Italy, we see these incredible images of Jesus rising from the tomb as a star being, as a cosmic traveler preparing to return to his original form. So he phased in from his light body form, took on flesh and blood form, and then in his resurrection phased back out and now wears his star cloak or resurrection body in this artwork. In this example here from Florence, we see he's literally got a cloak covered with 6-pointed stars, the same as the cloak of light of the angelic beings, as the risen beings. That cloak of light symbolizes the Shroud of Turin, which is the burial shroud of Christ. The shroud is a herringbone linen fabric measuring about 4.1 by 1.1 meters, or about 14 feet by 3 feet. It contains the double image of a man. Both the textile fiber that's used, the linen, and the processing method, and its measures corresponding precisely to the 8x2 Syrian cubits tell of a Middle Eastern origin, of a Jewish environment, and of funeral rituals of a specific time, the 1st century AD. Yesterday, April 11th, 2020, the Catholic Church did something quite remarkable. The Archbishop of Turin allowed the Shroud of Turin to be put on display. I, along with millions of other people, tuned in to watch this display and was somewhat surprised that they chose this specific angle to view the shroud. They didn't show the shroud in its complete form, presenting to you the illuminated body, front and back, of a crucified man. Instead, they only showed it from this angle, which made it very difficult to detect exactly what you were looking at. I don't know why they did that, but I'm just kind of perplexed that they did. The fact is that one of the mysteries of the shroud, or one of the intriguing things about the shroud, is that the image of the resurrected man can only be seen from a distance. If you're looking at the shroud close up, you're not able to distinguish those physical features. And there's a reason why that is so, a scientific reason why that image can only be seen from a distance. And the reason why is because the image on the shroud is a photographic negative, not a painting, of a man who was tortured, who was beaten, and who had had a crown of thorns impaled on his head, and who carried a heavy crossbeam on his shoulders. It was only with the invention of photography and this first ever photograph of the shroud in 1898 that we were able to perceive what was actually encoded onto the Shroud of Turin by this resurrected man, who I am absolutely certain was Jesus or Yeshua. Again, it portrays a man who was crucified with nails driven through his wrists and his heels, exactly corresponding to the crucifixion story told in the New Testament. The Bible describes the mocking of Jesus before his crucifixion. Part of this mocking include the placement of a crown of thorns on his head. This was not done to other crucifixion victims, but the shroud shows evidence of wounds from sharp spike-like utensils around the top of his head. Shroud experts believe that a crown of thorns is the source of the blood flows on the head of the man in the Shroud of Turin, pointing us to the reality that this is, in fact, the burial shroud of Christ. And I'm going to share with you some of the scientific evidence that tells us why we believe that this is truly the burial shroud of Jesus. For one thing, the face is a dead ringer for what we see on this early Christian icon. That is part of the historical evidence that we're going to show. But Dr. Gilbert Lavoie has presented evidence that the bloodstains occurred when the shroud, the person evidenced in the shroud, was actually standing upright and was levitating. The only way that that image could be created, based on the position of the feet, with the toes on the right foot pointing downward and the left knee slightly more flexed, is if this figure was suspended. In addition, there's no crushing from the buttocks, the back, or any body parts on the reverse side of the shroud. If a body was placed on that linen shroud, you would see evidence of that crushing. There is none. It's a perfect image, which is consistent with the hypothesis that Jesus was in fact levitating up in an upright position when that image was formed. His hair doesn't fall down on his shoulders in a crushed way. It's as if he's standing upright, again, supporting this hypothesis. In fact, 21st century science has now taken us to the point where we can now say for a fact, these are absolute facts. One, the shroud image was produced between 6 AD and 66 AD. It's been totally disproven that this is some kind of 13th century forgery. There is no possible way an artist in the 13th century could create the image that we see on the Shroud of Turin. Number two, pollen on the shroud tells science it came from Jerusalem, or it had been there at that time, between 6 AD and 66 AD in the springtime. Three, from extensive microscopic, radiographic, and chemical analysis, shroud scientists cannot find a method by which the image was produced. The shroud image cannot be reproduced even with modern technology. Experts are in agreement that the image on the linen shroud is not made up of any physical substance such as paint or pigment. So how did it get there? Again, there's no possible way that this is a forgery by some 13th century artist, because there's no paint, there's no pigment, there's no evidence of any physical substance that produced this image. Why? Because it's not a photograph and it's not a physical image. While it manifests in the physical plane, it was produced by non-physical spiritual means. Scientists from Italy's National Agency for New Technologies, Energy, and Sustainable Economic Development spent years trying to reproduce the shroud's markings with all the best advanced technology. And they came to the conclusion that the image on the shroud is, in fact, an alteration of the surface of the linen by some effect of light or radiation, something which also makes the linen turn yellow. The light energy was able to image the body and surrounding objects, including the markings on the tops of coins placed on his eyes and the flowers, at exactly the same time that this image is produced. And they have demonstrated that certain key features of the image can be replicated by projecting short duration, high intensity ultraviolet rays on the surface of the linen. They can't exactly duplicate the image, but they know they're headed in the right direction. It is thought by scientists that an ultraviolet energy source is the only thing that could have produced the image. And there is now this evidence that suggests that a crucified man 2,000 years ago emitted from within every cell of his body a sudden, short, intense burst of radiant energy from his body that we cannot replicate with technology. This is because it was produced from within his body, from within his soul. And this is what produced this incredible image that suggests, again, the source of light that is totally uniform came from within his body. This is not a photograph, but it is an artifact of the resurrection of Jesus. And again, when we look at the shroud, the markings clearly show a body that endured extreme torture, followed by crucifixion. In December of 2011, the scientists said that the shroud image was created by a supernatural light. It cannot possibly be a medieval forgery, as you hear over and over again in mainstream media and coming from mainstream scientists who really, in the end, don't have a clue what they're talking about. These scientists have concluded that something akin to ultraviolet lasers, far beyond the capacity of medieval forgers and even our capacity today, could have created the image. It was created by a burst of light that came from within his body. And this is what we are now understanding about the Shroud of Turin, is that it, in fact, is an artifact of his resurrection, but it is more than that even. If the Shroud of Turin was indeed created by the same phenomena that caused Jesus' body to glow brighter than the sun, then the extraordinary features of this shroud provide an explanation for how that image was created. It was created by Jesus phasing into light, by a burst of light from within his body, as exemplified in all these wonderful images from Christian art. The story is true. Christ, resurrected from the dead, came here as a cosmic traveler to show us how to do this. Now, the middle ground is the Shroud of Turin, of whether or not it is the actual burial shroud of Jesus, is open and unanswered. That's the middle ground here. In my view, it is an absolute proof of Christ's resurrection. because Christian belief says something extraordinary happened in a tomb just over 2,000 years ago, and this cloth was known to have been present. It is considered the most important and most studied relic of Christianity. Used to be a relic. We're not going to call it a relic anymore because now we are shifting our understanding. Newsflash, the shroud is no longer considered a relic. Beginning in the year 2000, Cardinal Ratzinger, later to be known as Pope Benedict XVI, wrote that the Shroud of Turin is a truly mysterious image which no human artistry was capable of producing. In some inexplicable way, it appeared imprinted upon cloth and believed to show the true face of Christ, the crucified and risen Lord. The shroud, he says, profoundly challenges and confounds human intellect. Absolutely true. And science has tried to explain it, but no universally accepted process has been proposed to do so. The image on the shroud defies duplication by human hands because it was not created by human consciousness. In June 2008, 3 years after he became Pope, Pope Benedict announced that the shroud would be publicly displayed in the spring of 2010 and stated that he would like to go to Turin to see it along with other pilgrims. Claire and I were there. It was our third date. We met in Egypt. Our first date was a cappuccino at the paws of the pyramid. Our second date was in Florida. Our third date, we went to see the Shroud of Turin together when it went on display in 2010. One of the most life-changing events of my life. During his visit to Turin on May 2nd, 2010, Claire and I were there just a couple weeks afterward, Benedict described the Shroud of Turin as an extraordinary icon. The icon of Holy Saturday, corresponding in every way to what the gospel tells us of Jesus. An icon written in blood, the blood of a man who is scourged, crowned with thorns, crucified, and whose right side was pierced, and who resurrected from the dead. The point is, it's not a relic anymore. It's an icon, an icon. We understand that. An icon is a two-way sacred mirror. It is a communications portal. It is a method of transmission. That is what the shroud is. It's a love letter from the resurrected Christ saying, here are my frequencies of resurrection, of love, light, and ultimate cosmic compassion. Here it is for you. Look at this shroud. Receive my blessing. I can't be there in person, but my shroud is there. I am in it, and it is in me. I am in you, and you are in me. We are all together. We are quantumly entangled. And through this icon, I can transmit to you the codes of resurrection. It is an icon written in his blood and his light and his love and his compassion. One of Benedict XVI's last acts of Pope was to authorize the broadcast of video of the shroud from Turin Cathedral, first time it was seen on TV. In a carefully worded message, Pope Benedict asked and answered a rhetorical question. How is it that the faithful, like you, pause before this icon of a man scourged and crucified and resurrected? It is because the man of the shroud invites us to contemplate Jesus of Nazareth. That is the closest the Catholic Church has come to saying, this is the resurrection shroud of Christ. This is the resurrected Christ that is right before you. They will not take that extra step because why do you need the church after that? You don't. All we need is the shroud. And this is my photo from 2010 on our first visit. Claire and I were 5 feet away from it. And it was the most profound thing to feel that love and light pouring off us and then to see this golden orb manifesting in our consciousness as we meditated. The Pope said that when we look at the shroud, we see as in a mirror the suffering of Christ. No, we see the resurrection and love and compassion of Christ, the ultimate act of compassion. He gave over his life for us and left us the shroud as a trail for us to follow and a way for us to connect with him. 3 years later, on March 30th, 2013, as part of Easter celebrations, there was an extraordinary exposition of the shroud in the Cathedral of Turin. It wasn't open to the public, but now this time Pope Francis is on it, and he's saying, so Looking upon the man of the shroud, I make St. Francis of Assisi's prayer before the crucifix my own. Most high and glorious God, enlighten the darkness of my heart and grant me true faith, certain hope, and perfect charity, sense and understanding, Lord, so that I may carry out your holy and true command. Amen. The man of the shroud is Christ, the compassionate Christ. And that is what we ask him to do, is to infuse us with that compassion. Point is, Pope Francis and his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, have both described the Shroud of Turin as an icon. And in choosing this carefully worded description, we realize the popes are telling us something astounding about the shroud. It's not a relic. It's a two-way method of communication. It's a sacred mirror. It's a way for us to connect with the cosmic Christ and to bring the cosmic Christ into our life. Even looking at a picture of the shroud transmits those codes and vibrations. It's an icon of Christ's great love and compassion for humankind. I call it the icon of love, the cosmic Christ demonstration of the power of compassion. That's what the Shroud of Turin is. It's the icon of love, the Shroud of Christ. And the fact that it was the custom of artists who made paintings of the shroud to have their paintings make contact with the shroud suggests the belief that I'm right, that it could transmit a blessing. It transmits a blessing. So if the Shroud of Turin is a two-way mirror, a method of communication with the cosmic Christ in the heavenly realms, it's literally a portal or a conduit, right? Yeah. Is the material world and the spiritual world open to each other through the Christ icon of love? Yes. How far can we stretch this? I think we can stretch it pretty far. I mean, like really far. But before we do that, I want to just give you further evidence that the face on the Shroud of Turin belongs to Jesus. And historically, we can show this without a shadow of a doubt. Now, that scientifically, we know exactly that the shroud was present at the time of Jesus. And now historically, through paintings, we can show this as well. In early Christian art, Jesus was not portrayed the way he is on the shroud. He's shown as a young, beardless man. He's shown as the Good Shepherd, for example, in the model of the Greek god Helios. Then there's the 3rd and 4th century images of Jesus, beardless, with a magic wand in his hand, performing the miracles. Then there's the 5th and 6th century images that we find, for example, in England, where he's portrayed as Apollo or Helios. But then after the 6th century, all of this changed. What happened? This is when the Shroud of Turin was rediscovered in Edessa in Turkey. After that moment, suddenly, all of the faces of Jesus start to resemble the cosmic Christ. He reappears. It's exactly the same face that we see on the Shroud of Turin. The reason why is because this is the face of Christ. This is the face that is seen on the Shroud of Turin. These artists knew it, and they began duplicating the actual historical face of Christ. And it perfectly matches the Shroud of Turin. Why? Because that's Christ. That is the resurrection shroud of Christ. There's absolutely no doubt about it from an artistic and historical perspective, and now science is saying the same thing. You put the grid pattern over the image of Christ at St. Catherine's, over the Shroud of Turin, it's a perfect match, absolute perfect match. The only way this is possible is if these artists all suddenly had a simultaneous vision of Christ, or if one of these artists had seen the Shroud of Turin when it was in hiding and began revealing the original and true face of Christ that appears on the shroud, and now they start duplicating that image. And this is what we see historically. Now we're coming up into the 15th century. It's exactly the same face as what we see in Sinai. This is Cimabue, 14th century, same face as on the shroud. Bellini, same face on the shroud. De Messina, Raphael, they all got the memo. This is the face of Christ because Christ is the face that we see on the Shroud of Turin. It's his resurrection shroud, his icon. And what these artists are actually creating for us are additional icons through which we can make eye contact with the cosmic Christ. And isn't that kind of a pun on icon, eye contact, the cosmic Christ? That is the purpose of these images, is for us to see eye to eye so that Jesus can enter into our soul and transmit the Holy Spirit. And of course, this is exactly what Leonardo shows in his famous Christ Pantocrator, a painting that just sold for $453 million on auction in 2017. It's exactly the same face as what we see at St. Catherine's Monastery in the Sinai, and they're both carrying the triple dot symbol of the power of resurrection. He brought that orb with him, in my view. It's part of what he brought as the cosmic star child. So to recap, all of these images are derived from the same source, the Shroud of Turin, the Shroud of Christ, the icon of love, and may even carry the original power of this source. Think about that. Think about the possibilities of Christ as a cosmic being infusing this shroud with his vibration. Do you know the Templars, when they were persecuted, they were arrested by the Catholic Church, they were accused of idol worship because they would take linen strands and place it on an idol, that they would charge those linen strands that would give them power in their earthly life, but also guarantee them safe passage in the afterlife. After torture at the hands of the Catholic Church, the Templar finally admitted that what they were charging their linen strands on was the Shroud of Turin. They possessed it, and they believed that it could transmit a holy vibration that would protect their physical body and grant them safe passage in the afterlife. This is exactly the same concept as the icons, that these images transmit the vibration of the resurrection or light body, and we can infuse our own light body by studying or contemplating, meditating, and reflecting on images of Christ, Mary, Padmasambhava, any of these other ascended beings that we see in the resurrection body or the light body. I've taken this into ancient Egypt, among the Maya tradition, into the Hawaiian tradition. It's a worldwide tradition that talks about how these ascended beings are rainbow light body beings and how images can assist us in receiving these codes and vibrations. And it's because we are made in the perfect image of God, and we have the spiritual capacity to participate in or mirror Christ in his light body. For Buddhists, they talk in terms not of a Christ body, but of our true nature, that this is who we truly are as beings. We're all living a life of samsara, covered over by negative perceptions and false perceptions about who we are as beings. But deep within us is this Christ being, this illuminated being, this glory body, this resurrection body. And as we begin to connect with it, we begin to change as people. We become more kind, more compassionate, more giving towards others. As we contemplate, meditate, and reflect on these, we're actually rewiring our brain to make connections to our new selves. This is the principle of neuroscience that I cover, that Claire and I offer in our Art and Science of Living Ascension presentations. In fact, one of those webinars is available here on portaltoascension.com. And the principle is that through contemplation and meditation and reflection on these images, we're literally rewiring our brain to make connections to our new self, to our Christ self. And as your nerve cells fire in response to the images, they're wiring together or weaving together a web of light within your brain, within your spirit and your soul, that becomes the canvas for your new body of light, your Christed self. Your brain changes, your body changes, your emotions change. We begin to return to our original state of being, call it the perfect state, our natural state, our Christ state, the blessed state. And as you paint this canvas, you're actually visualizing the actual experience of the light body, and you're fabricating a new life. The images align us with the cosmic Christ, our future selves, our future destiny, and also deeply our true selves, our perfect self. Remember what Jesus said about perfection. I tell you the truth, it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Jesus is telling us that our physical flesh and blood body isn't going through the portal, but our rainbow light body will. And in Salvador Dali's incredible painting, The Last Supper, we see Jesus in this interbasic realm. He's part physical, part flesh and blood, but he's exuding this rainbow light, exuding the compassion of the rainbow light body. He's already phasing into it at the Last Supper in anticipation of the crucifixion and the resurrection. A rich man had asked Jesus, what's required for eternal life? And Jesus said, follow the commandments. In other words, how do we attain our light body, our Christ body, our resurrection body? And the answer is, we follow the commandments. Love with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like unto it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. Jesus is telling us the law of compassion is the way to attaining our light body. This is the law of the cosmic Christ. Love with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself, because your neighbor is yourself. We are all quantumly entangled. And this is why your neighbor's suffering is your suffering. And until we do something about it, we will all continue to suffer. Well, the rich man had told Jesus that he'd always kept those commandments, and he wanted to know what else is required. And Jesus then told him, if thou wilt be perfect, meaning whole, holy, complete, and compassionate, go and sell what you've got, give it to the poor. You'll have treasure in heaven, and then you can follow me through the eye of the needle. And I'm not saying for you to go sell your house, your car, quit your job, and go focus on maintaining or attaining your light body. It's probably not a bad idea, but the idea here is that we can become more compassionate. And this is the law of the cosmic Christ. This is the way we will attain our perfection and place ourselves in higher resonance with the cosmic Christ. And then one day we will follow him. In closing here, I would say that if you seek this robe of light, that the image will show you the way, that acts of compassion and kindness are the acts that weave that robe of light. But ultimately, it's the spirit of the cosmic Christ, the Holy Spirit of the cosmic Christ entering into us that will give us the greatest amplitude, if you will, of this spirit, the greatest infusion of this spirit. And in closing, I want to refer you to an image that was painted in 1937. It came after St. Faustina's vision of the cosmic Christ appearing to her wearing a white robe and telling her to paint an image according to the pattern you see with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you. He attached many promises to those who venerate or love this image. And so upon her request, Mr. Eugene Kesmarowski began the painting of the image in 1934. And in her diary, St. Faustina wrote that Jesus told her, paint an image according to the pattern you see with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you. I desire that this image be venerated, meaning loved, adored, first in your chapel and then throughout the world. And I promise that the soul that will love this image will not perish. Well, Jesus happens to be using the Abhaya Mudra, in which he has his palm open, transmitting to you the light that is coming out of his awakened heart chakra. He is transmitting to us the light of the cosmic Christ, the compassion of the cosmic Christ. And he says, I am offering people a vessel with which they are to keep coming for graces to the fountain of mercy. That vessel is this image with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you. Our goal, Jesus is saying, is to let God's love flow through this image to our heart and to all those who need it. And in closing, I ask that you let that love and light flow through you, be it through this image, through the icon of love, the shroud of the resurrected Christ, or any of the other images that I have presented to you today as guides for you in your ascension. Let those two inspire you to weave your cloak of love and light, your cloak of compassion. Wear that as you go forward in these coming days. Imbue yourself and everyone you come into contact with that love and light. I want to thank you all very much, the deepest possible gratitude and love and light for being here today. Thank you for all that you've given to Claire and I over these past years, your friendship, your guidance, your fellowship, your companionship, and especially your compassion. I hope that you will visit my website, williamhenry.net, and keep in touch with us. We have much, much more to share. This is the time where we must rise. This is the time for all future human history where we are making the decisions about how all future humans will live. And if we do our job right, we are laying down a steady base of love, light, and compassion that will see us all through into that future. I want to thank Neil Gar and Portal to Ascension for creating this sacred space for us today. Godspeed to you all. I love you with all my heart. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless.